Hey students, welcome to another Mr. Ness screencast. Today's aim is local culture, and here are your objectives. Please pause the video, look these questions over, and get ready to copy some vocab and take some notes. A major theme in this unit is the contrast between two types of culture, local culture and pop culture. In today's video, we will talk about local culture. In the next video, you'll learn about pop culture. So let's start with local culture. Local culture is also called folk culture. I prefer the term local culture, and that's what I will use in this class. But you may see the term folk culture on the AP exam. Now let's look at some characteristics of local culture. First, local culture changes quickly over space. What I mean by that is, if you travel from one place to another, the local culture in each of those places will be quite different. In other words, local culture is local. It's unique to a specific place in the world. And if you leave that place and go somewhere else, local culture will change. Let me give you an example. France and Germany are two neighboring countries in Europe. They're next to each other. They are near each other. But the local culture in one part of France is very different from the local culture in parts of Germany. The language is different, the food is different, the clothing styles might be different. So if you travel from France to Germany, you're not actually moving very far through space, but the local culture will change a lot. And that is what I mean when I say that it changes quickly over space. Now I want to look at why this is true. The main reason is that for most of history, a lack of communications technology meant that people that lived in one part of the world had almost no interaction with people in other parts of the world. So, in order to make their culture, they relied on what was around them. The food that they ate was the food that grew in their environment. Their architecture was built using materials that they found nearby, and the language they spoke had words that reflected their daily experience. People in Germany didn't eat mangoes because mangoes didn't grow in Germany. People in France didn't make their buildings out of bamboo because bamboo didn't grow in France. And people in Senegal had no word for snow because it never snowed in Senegal. So, in the absence of connectivity, people created cultural traits that reflected their local environment. Another way of expressing this same idea is to say that local culture has a sense of place. I'll come back to that term sense of place in a moment, but for now, I'll reiterate that local culture is unique to a certain place. It doesn't exist everywhere. If you were traveling and heard people speaking French and eating croissants, you would know that you were probably in France, because there aren't a lot of places in the world where people speak French and eat croissants. So in this case, a unique language, French, and a unique food, croissants, make France special and different from other places on the earth. Next, local culture tends to diffuse through relocation diffusion. That means that it only spreads if the people that practice it literally migrate to a new place and bring their culture with them. We don't often see the traits of local culture diffusing through expansion diffusion, just relocation diffusion. I told you a moment ago that local culture changes quickly over space, but it changes slowly over time. And what that means is, as the years go by, local culture mostly stays the same. It's traditional, it's old, and over centuries it doesn't change very much. To go back to my example of France, people in France have been speaking French and eating croissants for hundreds of years. Before I go on, take a second to think about what you've written down so far. Local culture changes quickly over space, but slowly over time. If you find that confusing, pause the video and review what I just told you. It's important that you understand this difference. Quickly over space, but slowly over time. The last characteristic of folk culture is that its origins are usually unknown. Who was the first person to speak French? Who was the person who made the first croissant? Nobody knows the answers to these questions because they happened so long ago. Remember, local culture is old. Also, it evolved very slowly over time, so there probably wasn't one person who first spoke French or who made the first croissant. Instead, the French language and the recipe for croissants developed slowly over hundreds or even thousands of years. Alright, now let's go back to this term sense of place. Sense of place refers to the unique physical and human characteristics that give a certain location its identity. They make that place special and different from other places. You learned about this idea in the first unit when I asked you to think about aspects of New York City that make it unique, the aspects that give New York City a sense of place. Some of you mentioned the beaches that we have, the skyscrapers, the subway system, and the bodegas or corner stores. All these things are found in New York, but not in most other places. One thing to be careful of, sense of place, by definition, refers to both physical characteristics, like beaches, and man-made characteristics, like corner stores. But when we talk about sense of place in relation to local culture, we are only referring to the human characteristics, because culture is always man-made. So beaches would not be an example of New York's local culture, but bodegas or corner stores would. Since local culture is by definition local and not found everywhere, it creates a sense of place in the location that it's practiced. Now it's time to review the objectives, and if you don't know the answer to any of them, please rewind the video and look again. I will see you in class. Bye, students.